add in historical aspects of that. I'd like to hear about the eugenics and sterilization programs, those movements, and how they continue to impact the framework in the medical community. So I completely agree with you. And so if we need to take some time to restructure, I propose that we do that while we have the time allocated to us.
Yes, absolutely. Would any, oh, yes. And to comment to that, I absolutely agree. There definitely needs to be an intentional conversation around those topics. In terms of public health, there is an article that was released last year, and it was pretty a groundbreaking article in the field of medicine and public health. It was published by the New England Journal of Medicine, and the title of the article is Reparations as a Public Health Priority, a Strategy for Ending Black-White Health Disparities. It was written by two doctors, Mary T. Bassett and Sandro Galea. And in the article, they discuss, right, reparations as a public health priority, but they also talk about, infant mortality and issues surrounding that. But notably, there in the article, there isn't necessarily a conversation about mental health. And so, yes, so we do have 30 minutes left if we wanted to take any action around restructuring the December hearing to account for a discussion on mental health, or taking a long view, right? The initial 10 meeting proposal that we came up with and tentatively voted for was based on the notion that we only had 10 meetings, right? But we know we've had these meetings virtually. We have up to 10 meetings that we can be reimbursed for, but we haven't utilized that yet because we've all been meeting virtually. So we can add a whole new day, right? Between now and our December hearing, or between the December hearing and then our next hearing, which would be February 2022, to talk about any issue we want, but particularly the issues that Member Groves and Member Holder raised. So just putting those out there as alternatives, and that if at any point a member would like to take action, I will entertain a motion on that. Do any other members have any feedback, right, on what we see on the screen so far in terms of the December hearing and witnesses and additional topics for consideration for the December hearing or hearings in general?
Chair Moore, this is Michael Newman in the DOJ. I don't know if you can hear me or see me, but
Mr. Newman, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we talked about yesterday was agendizing the review and approval of the outlines, which would also, as a point of order, the schedule that we talked about in the last meeting would call for the outlines to be reviewed during the next meeting. So I think we have a slide where I can talk about that, and I was asked, I believe, by Member Grills or Member Tamaki or Member Holder. There was a number of discussions about a proposal from the DOJ with regard to the review and approval of the outlines and the draft, and that would need to be factored into the December meeting agenda as well. And so if I may, I'd like to present on that right now, just to provide more information for your conversation on the agendizing.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. So as I mentioned, we talked about a proposal based on a motion that carried by the task force, instructing us to provide outlines and then a final draft for votes by the task force. Based on the current meeting schedule, which I understand you're reviewing right now, so we based our dates on the current meeting schedule, we would need to reserve time on December 7th. So just to just to recap, you all have a number of the outlines already, and we've asked for feedback, and we want extensive feedback. These outlines should reflect the task force's conclusions and findings through this process. We want to make sure that the outlines that we're developing the draft on for the task force to actually, generate the report from are reflective of the task force members' positions and feelings and reflections on what we've all been hearing. So we have half of the outlines are already out. We're waiting for input. We will be redoubling efforts in the next couple of weeks to get the rest of the outlines done, ideally by mid-November in advance of the December hearing, so that you all will have time with the outlines. We would then have the December 7th and 8th hearing be the hearing in which, pursuant to the motion of yesterday, the task force would discuss, provide edits, and vote to approve DOJ to move forward with final drafting of a draft report for the task force to then consider. Again, according to the current meeting schedule, I know you may be revisiting that, but according to the current meeting schedule, we would require some time then in the mid-February hearing for the task force to discuss and provide edits on the first draft so that the task force has an opportunity to talk as a group about what's in that draft and make sure that the draft reflects, again, the direction, impressions, conclusions of the task force. Then we would go back and staff would again, based on the direction of the task force, compile a final draft for the task force, of the task force's report for the task force, which would then be reviewed in the mid-March hearing, which is the last currently scheduled hearing before the June 1st date that the task force previously voted to publish the first report. So what you're looking at in this slide is our plan for presenting and making sure that the report is both efficiently getting done on a schedule, and is coming back to the task force for the task force's direction continuously.
Mr. Newman, I'm not sure if you're in the position to speak on this right now or any staff member. In terms of the actual written report, do you know where conversations around mental health and physical health may fall in the actual report? That may inform when we want to speak on it in the public.
Sure. I'm happy to speak on it. In the outlines that we've provided to you, there is one outline that is the health section of the report. And that outline includes some key points relating to mental health and other health issues. So I believe that you have that at this point. And we would, of course, welcome any kind of information or additions or, supplementation of that. Obviously, the ultimate draft of the report would need to reflect what we hear in the hearings and what all the task force members want to say in that component of the report. But the base outline with some of the base information you have, and we welcome any edits or suggestions or additions. I also wanted to mention, I said before, the June 1st deadline is by vote of the task force. That's the statutory date for the report. I need to correct myself so that I'm not saying anything incorrect. That's the statutory date for the report, and so we'll need to comply with that statutory mandate. So the mid-March hearing is the last hearing that we have scheduled for the task force to be able to vote to approve the final draft before, according to the current schedule, before the June 1st statutory deadline.
Mr. Newman, I have a question about what is your projection in terms of how much time would be needed, how much time would we need to allocate to for each of these dates you've outlined? I'm just trying to figure out how much time we have for witnesses, since I feel like that is probably the biggest value add for this report, getting witness statements. I'm trying to just figure out what is the schedule going to look like and how much time we will need to allocate away from witnesses to do this.
Sure, and I completely understand that question. I was looking at the schedule. I mean, if you're contemplating changing around the schedule for the witness panels and focusing more on mental health or health in general at the meeting, I think the answer to that question is really the task forces. Far be it for me to say that you can only have a certain amount of time to discuss and provide edits and vote on the outlines. Ideally, we welcome, like I said, all of your edits and recommendations and suggestions in the outline, so that when you get the final outline circulated to you in advance of the December meeting, it will reflect already your thoughts and additions and things like that. Again, these are the outlines. So for the outline component, we should be able to at least incorporate the things that people want to be saying in the final report, incorporating the additions, and if there are concerns, redressing those concerns. We can do that, one-on-one as people provide feedback on the outlines as you're going through it. That doesn't need to necessarily wait for a full discussion in the meeting. The other two meetings, I think that's, there's a question about, the amount of time. That'll really depend on the discussion that ends up being had.
Chair Moore, may I, along those same lines, ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so in batch 2 of the outlines, item number 10 is where health and public health come in, but it's currently listed as healthcare infrastructure and public health, which again is fairly narrow and doesn't quite capture the mental health or general medicine practices in medicine. So I think the earlier question about when does this show up, and that could determine when we need to make sure we include adequate time to mental health and health, is that if it's going to go into that interim report due in June, then we need to perhaps have a new meeting added to make sure that that topic is adequately covered, maybe a one-day session. And I would suggest if we end up doing something like that, that we consider adding an extra session after the holidays, because otherwise, if we do this, we have to do it right before Thanksgiving to give people adequate time, expert witnesses to have adequate time to prepare. Because trying to fit, into 10 to 15 minutes, some of the information I anticipate will be coming out will be a true challenge. People will have the information, but how to put it into a 10 to 15 minute soundbite will be the real challenge. So I guess what I'm asking is, one, I think we need to revise the way it's currently listed in the outline to be something more inclusive than healthcare infrastructure and public health. And then secondly, that if we want to make sure that we include that as part of information and findings for that interim report, then we consider adding an extra meeting that could be one day to address those topics. We
I
can't
don't know if that
hear more.
was that a question directed to me. I can't.
No, it was just an open comment to anyone to respond to. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the sooner the action we take, the better. That was actually something I was going to suggest, member girls, is that we consider action items around changing up the schedule for the December hearing, because we would have this November to contemplate this individually, how we want to reconceptualize the process. We have a whole month to do that. Then we come back in December with our, our action items that we could make motions on about how we want to change the future of the hearings. But like I said, I think the sooner the better. So if you want to kind of, and I don't want to prematurely put this out there, but if you're ready to make a motion around adding another hearing related to those topics, we can do that. But I also wanted to kind of recenter back to December 8th and 9th to get a consensus from the task force about how it's currently structured, and if the December hearing in particular needs to change, and if so, what needs to be changed.
I would be hesitant to offer a motion at this point, not having heard from some of the other task force members to see what their thoughts are on this.
Yes. And I'll be quiet for a minute. I just wanted to just provide some more feedback. So for instance, on the topics of gentrification and homelessness, thinking about bringing people in, like there's someone named Damian Goodman, who's a part of 40 Acres in a Mall. He was leading the efforts to try to buy the Crenshaw Mall. He's been leading efforts around anti-gentrification efforts for a while now in the Southern California area. There's Shirley Raines, who is a homelessness advocate. Pete White is also someone who's a homelessness advocate. In terms of public health, maybe bringing in those two doctors that broke that groundbreaking report where they're arguing that reparations is a public health priority. And I think to Member Grill's point, right, not necessarily inviting high-profile speakers to the art, media, and entertainment section or panel, but bringing in some folks who are like on the ground day to day, trying to create change in Hollywood and other areas, and even academics, right? There's Dr. Darnell Hunt, who's I think the director of the Book Center. He was, he has a report that gets published every year about the diversity of Hollywood and how Hollywood could be changed to ensure there's increased diversity. Just putting those names out there and ideas for how the December hearing can be structured and conceptualized. Does any other task force member have any feedback, questions, comments, or concerns with the tentative agenda as it's laid out?
Chair Moore, I just have a few.
Oh, Member Monica Montgomery Stepp, you are recognized.
Thank you. The format is kind of hard for me to see, so it's probably hard for you to see too. So yeah, I do agree that we have to or need to broaden the definition of how we're going to talk about health. It kind of is reminding me of what Isabel Wilkerson said about really using the determinants as health determinants as a measure when we begin to quantify the harm too. So I think it's important that we break that off into maybe another day, which would leave a section of what is currently before us for December 7 and 8. It would leave a section blank. And so thinking about just breaking up, as you stated, Chair, breaking up the entertainment, arts, I think sports, there's a lot there too. So we would probably need to do the infrastructure, gentrification, homelessness. Let me pull it up on my own in one day, and then do the entertainment, sports, arts, and culture another day. So that's what, when I'm thinking about all of the comments, that is what I think I would maybe like some feedback on. Just want to put out there too that we had discussed, and I think there was a consensus on bringing the Secretary of State back. And so I think maybe that's later in the conversation, maybe that's sooner. I don't know how much we want to, we agree that the conversation around the community of eligibility is, an evolving one. And so just thinking about that as well. That would be my feedback. Oh, just one more, Dr. Rodney Hood in the area of public health, and then Dr. Isaac Martin in the area of gentrification. But those are two that I'm thinking of that I can submit to the DOJ. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Montgomery Steppe. That was helpful. Thank you. Vice Chair Brown?
Madam Chair, members of the task force, I am of the position that we definitely need to give quality time to the issue of public health and breaking it down into mental and physical health and the resources that we have not had to be a healthy community.
So it sounds like it's shaping up, well, from the task force members who have spoken so far, that public health should potentially be dropped from this December hearing and added to a more larger conversation about health. Does that sound right, Member Grills? Because I know you also said you don't want, there needs to be quality time to mental health, particularly, and physical health as well.
Right.
So what are your thoughts about public health being added into that conversation?
Yeah. I think it fits in that conversation, and that if we pulled it out of the December meeting and then had a day that could unpack mental health, physical health, public health, because there are things to be addressed in all of them, and for different age groups. Black children, the suicide rates, higher than any others in the country. There's so much there. So, yeah.
Okay, that's Member Javon Scott Lewis, you are recognized.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So I wanted to just kind of also emphasize the fact that some of the topics that we are going to begin addressing, there's a time shift to them where they are more immediate experiences. So what we've been doing thus far has been really addressing historical issues, right? And so what we're doing by thinking about questions, around health, education, housing, these are much more immediate and pressing matters for the community. And so we actually do need to make sure that we provide considerable time. So again, this is in support to, I think, what is being proposed. I have a comment regarding the sports and entertainment emphasis. I'd like for us to also consider moving away partly an emphasis in that area on exclusion, right? Again, there's a component that's important to that, but it's not necessarily representative as we can think of injury related to health, housing, education, etc. However, it is an important area to discuss because of the contributions that African Americans have made to those industries, right? And the lack of recognition that they have received for those contributions. So in other words, there's a shift in what qualifies as injury, as far as I'm concerned, when we begin to think about sports and entertainment, right? So we're thinking about right, you get what I'm saying, right? So the amount of, capital that is generated by the sports industry, right, on the backs of, say, Black athletes, and the disproportionate lack of capital that is returned to the communities that they come from, right? The contributions that, the cultural contributions that Black culture, art, etc., has effectively provided, setting the foundation for what we understand as popular American culture, yet that is gone, right, unrecognized. In the words of Mos Def, Elvis Presley has no soul, Chuck Berry is rock and roll, right? And so I just want us to kind of think about, when we're thinking about injury in these different areas, I want us to also pay attention, right, to how we're qualifying and locating what qualifies as injury. And so I think, focusing on exclusion from entertainment it's important, but there's actually a bigger set of questions around that industry that looks like the unrecognized contributions and the actual capital related to those contributions of the Black community. Thank you.
For that, Member Javon Scott Lewis. I don't have the name offhand, but in preparing for this, I did find an academic who wrote about NCAA and the millions of dollars that Black student athletes, don't necessarily get to see, and kind of having like a scathing critique of that industry and that system. It's super important conversation.
And we can think about what's happening on TikTok, right? Where Black creators are constantly, right, having their intellectual cultural property stolen and are not getting credited for it. And so, we can extend this even into thinking about, well, what do digital platforms, what is the reliance on Black productivity, right? So we're thinking about Black TikTok, for example, or Black Twitter, right, as engines for these apps, actual productivity.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you for that. So extending the conversation about media, maybe even to the digital media, being more intentional about that as well. Okay. Any other task force members have a comment or question as to the tentative agenda as it's presented right now? Then we can kind of shift the conversation to more action, where we, put into action some of the things that need to be changed to the agenda, what needs to be added in terms of substantive topics, but also action items. Member Tamaki, you're recognized.
Things. So as of yesterday's meeting, Lisa Holder, Chair Holder, Member Holder, and I are supposed to report back on subpoenas. So our intention is to confer and talk about what that means and what industries might be focused on and the practical aspect of how long it would take and whether we can shape a subpoena that's narrow enough to actually fit within our deadline that the legislature has imposed to actually be even helpful to the task force. I think all of those are open questions. So we're going to meet, but there needs to be time on the agenda to do that presentation on the question of subpoenas. And then with respect to healthcare, totally agree 100% with Member Grills and Member Holder and the other comments. I'm just looking at the first page of on December 7th. That first. Oh, I do want to say that the one absolute that we have to do is approve those outlines, because if we don't approve the outlines, it seems to me that it puts the June 1 report in jeopardy. So I just want to emphasize, I think this is what people already know, but there needs to be sufficient time on the agenda to actually approve 12 outlines. And that's probably a lot to bite off. We've already got 6, and we'll have another 6 by mid-November, and then edits due, and then approval process. So is that going to take 30 minutes? Is it going to take an hour, 2 hours? It really is, and it's the heart of, it's one of the pillars of what this task force has to do. It's something that's going to live on way beyond the task force. It's going to resonate in California and across the country. So I think we got to be very mindful about that approval process, and then do it timely, read it timely, so that the DOJ can do its thing. And then turning to the first page on December 7th, I was just wondering about some things. There's a section on discrimination and technology, and I'm wondering if you could just shine a light on that for me. I can understand the topics of highways, freeways. I would think that redevelopment that Member Brown has talked about so much in decimating Black communities would be a part of that. And then I could see the connection to gentrification and homelessness. I'm just wondering on the topic of discrimination and technology, how that thinks. We've had some testimony about the discrimination in Silicon Valley, particularly Black engineers, and it was startling statistic about some 60% of the software programmers in DC are Black, and what the number is 5% or less than that in Silicon Valley. Whether that is what this refers to, or is it referring to something else? It was just unclear to me on the outline.
We already have a lot on the table to discuss. I'm almost reluctant to add anything else. But while we're having this open discussion, when we do talk about media and entertainment, I would like to also, again, to look at it from a historical perspective and talk about media and entertainment as one of the major generators of bias and racial stereotypes, and get information from someone who studies the intersection between history and entertainment to talk about African American stereotypes that are generated through the media, that have historically been generated through the media, social media since Reconstruction, and how that has, and that would be a good sort of cue in or setup for the conversations we're going to have later about psychological harm. So I think that this might be a place to talk about that, get a historian in here to talk about.
Yes, Member Grill.
Thank you. I extend what Member Holder has just shared at the risk of adding more. It's really more of an expansion. When we talk about media and entertainment, we would be remiss if we left out print and television news. When we talk about major drivers of bias, the stories that they select, well, let me not go into the details. We should probably make sure that we include media in terms of the news as well.
Okay, so in the interest of time, maybe it would be good to, in terms of action items, take action on some things that must be a part of this next hearing in December 8th and 9th, particularly around subpoena power, the outline review, and then also I would say the discussion about enabling the live chat. And so if there needs to be a motion to, officially or formally agendize those items on the December agenda, as chair, I'm entertaining a motion on that for right now.
I can take I'm sorry. Go ahead, Assembly Member Johnson.
No, all I was going to say, does that address what everyone wants? I will second it as long as we have incorporated everyone's wishes for the next meeting.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Let me take a step back. Other than the outline review, subpoena power, and discussion on the live chat, and are there any other things aside from fixing the scope of the subject matter? We'll get to that. But other than the outline review, subpoena power, and live chat discussion, are there any other items that are must-haves for this next hearing?
Just a point of clarification. I thought, were we going to have the live chat discussion today or next hearing?
Well, that's a good point. Now I'm just going to seek clarity from the DOJ about that. So, is this, in terms of voting for the live chat or discussion about the live chat, can we discuss that at this moment right now, or does that need to be formally put on the agenda and discussed for the next hearing? There's been some confusion about that.
So I don't know, Chair Moore, I don't know if the parliamentarian would weigh in. I think our interpretation probably would be, because I don't believe this is an action item, but let me just look at how it was noted.
Correct.
It's not an action item for this component, so I think it would have to be discussed at the next meeting and voted on at the next meeting.
That is correct. That is correct. That is correct.
So parliamentarian, can I ask a question? So is the only thing that we can move right now as far as parliamentary procedures and rules and what we can and can't do, is it that we need to go ahead and adopt the outline and the draft schedule that was on the screen?
Okay, you're looking at the agenda. Yes, sir. You want to adopt the agenda, proposed agenda, and you might want to do it with flexibility so that if you're looking at the agenda in the timeline, and given what happened yesterday, I would also recommend that you add an agenda. Well, consider, I'm not going to suggest that you do it. I want you to think about adding an item on tomorrow, on the second day that says unfinished business, so that in the event that you don't finish something the first day, that you can consider it the second day. But recognize, be careful doing that, because that may elongate your agenda. So if you do that, just keep that in mind when you're spacing out, what you're considering on the first day as well, as well as the second day, so that 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 you have enough time. And you have at the bottom of your agenda on both days the phrase that that the times may change. So you're okay in terms of changing your time, but you definitely want to put that additional item, unfinished business, so that you can do what you wanted to do yesterday. You can put it over to the next day if you don't have enough time on the first day.
So I don't know where, I want to make sure we do this right.
Okay.
Was there a motion on the floor?
There has not been a motion made or seconded yet.
And Chair Moore, sorry, Assembly Member and Chair Moore, may I speak to two questions that I think are pending?
Yes, in the meantime, can staff place the agenda for the December hearing on the screen? Thank you.
Sure, and I think I can speak to the Assembly Member's question, which is because of the placement that we are in the agenda right now, we're not asking for we can't ask for a full vote on that full agenda. So we were responding yesterday. The task force voted on the structure for the report review, revisement, and approval process. So all we're saying in this segment of the meeting is that in order to get that done by the June 1st statutory timeframe, we would need time on the next meeting in order to have the outlines discussed and approved by the full task force, so that we can then turn to working to prepare a draft components of the report that reflect the task force's instructions as to what the report should contain. So the only pertinent point on this, Assembly Member, is that we would need to have time agendized in the next meeting for this component. And then I believe there was a question about infrastructure witness on expert testimony on discrimination in technology. That witness was on the Excel witness spreadsheet, and the witness is sort of the idea for that witness within this context of this technology discussion was to talk about discrimination in technology, how technology is utilized to discriminate, algorithms, artificial intelligence, and those issues. That's not necessarily something that needs to be resolved in this. I just wanted to make sure that I was responsive to the question about that particular witness. And again, if members of the task force have other witnesses on those topics, or you're voting on the agenda right now, so you may switch it all up. But I just wanted to make sure that was clear as to why they were placed there.
Okay. So I'm back again. So if we move to adopt the outline and the draft schedule that I guess is on the screen right now, that would help DOJ be able to stay on the timeline with their work?
That is correct. In order to comply with the vote that you all took yesterday, to schedule how the draft would be compiled for the task force's approval, because we only have three more meetings currently scheduled. Gotcha. You may be changing that, but according to the existing schedule, we would need time on the December meeting to vote on the outlines, time on the February meeting to vote on but to have a discussion about the first draft that you all already voted to sort of have this done, and then time in the mid-March meeting, which is the last meeting currently scheduled before the June 1st statutory deadline, to vote on the final draft.
And before I move to adopt the outline and draft schedule on this, would this impede anything else that's been discussed for the last, half hour, 45 minutes, that we can also try to make sure we get all of those discussions, all those pertinent information that everyone brought up, which is very significant, that we're able to get that done too? Or is that two separate issues?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I believe, I don't think they're two separate issues. I think that that's one thing that I think that would need to be resolved. And I think the thing that I heard earlier was the idea of shifting entertainment, sports, arts, and culture to either another meeting, or shifting health into its own meeting, to create room on the agenda, not just in order to fully evaluate the outlines, and also to vote and discuss these other issues. So I think that's what the discussion was. And of course, that's the decision of the task forces.
And
Assembly member, before you craft a motion, this little piece of information may help. I'm just sort of calculating a schedule, timeline-wise, because I think we should have a sense of what these items are how much time they're going to take up. If let's say if the outline review takes 2 hours, because if we're talking about all 12 sections, it's probably going to be a significant conversation we have to have. That's probably going to be about 2 hours. If we have to discuss the live chat, that could be another half hour. Subpoenas could be a half hour. Unfinished business could be a half hour. Based on that, that's 3.5 hours. That's just sort of my timestamps. But just so I'm thinking it's going to take about 3.5 hours just to discuss that business of the task force. And then I don't know how many witnesses are scheduled. So,
yeah, well, at the end of the day, that's our decision. We can do it in an hour, or we can do it in 5 hours. So that's really kind of up to us. It's not up to DOJ.
Yeah, either way, I think we need to have a timestamp on these so we have a sense of how much time it's going to take.
And we need to stick to it, even though it may be difficult. So can we put a time, because that's your concern, how much time? And then there's the devil in the details, but how much time should we commit to this so that we can get all of this done?
Well, something else that we may have to add, it depends, maybe I can get some feedback from task force members. a discussion about designating a press liaison. I don't know if any particular task force member would want to volunteer for that, but if we need to have a discussion around that, just to ensure that we're not missing any.
Madam Chair, I thought we decided that everything would run through you and the vice chair. Because, for example, I just got a press call right now. That's why I keep going back and forth. I'm referring them to you. So I thought that was something we kind of agreed to already. I don't think we were talking about hiring another person to do press or designating one of us as chair and vice chair. You should be speaking for the body, unless you want somebody else to do it.
No, I mean, that is something that I said, but understanding the different stakeholders in this process and people who are sticklers for process. So in the event that we need to have that conversation to formalize that, I was just putting that out there. That's all. But yes, since yesterday, the DOJ has sent me press inquiries, so we may not have to discuss that.
Okay. So I'm going to try this again. I think we can get it all done. I'm going to move to adopt the outline and draft schedule that is on the screen.
Second.
We moved and seconded to adopt the draft outlines and the agenda on the screen. Is there any discussion on this matter?
Sorry,
I have a question.
Chair Moore. I
Go
do respond.
Whoa.
Apologies to Member Joan Sawyer. I'm just wondering how this is going to be possible without extracting something from the agenda as it exists. In other words, if we add a couple hours or more to do the outlines, and it may even take more than the 2 hours, and then we add on the subpoenas and the other issues about chat and everything. I think one of these sessions just has to go, and either is treated in sort of a summary form, maybe relying upon not live witnesses, but the materials that we've been given to read, and then substitute in that process, or it's moved to an additional session. So, for example, and again, at the risk of offending someone who's very interested and wants to hear the testimony. For example, the morning session on infrastructure, might that instead be devoted to the outlines, for example? I just think we need to rejigger a few things in order to realistically have the time to do what we need to do. That's all.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Brown, you are recognized. Excuse me.
Yes, I have an emergency. I must leave there.
Oh, Vice Chair Brown, you have an emergency and you must leave. I hope all is well. You were cut off. I don't know if you wanted to continue to speak. But in the event that you are still here, I just wanted to say thank you, and we hope all is well.
You have a quorum. You still have a quorum, Madam Chair.
All right.
He was asking if we still had a quorum.
Yes. Yes, we do. Thank you. Yeah, and to Tamaki's question, like member Reggie Jones Sawyer, so it seems like from the conversation that we've had for the past 30 minutes or so, it seems as if people want health to be taken out of the agenda. And so if that is the case, then that kind of goes against the motion that's on the floor to adopt the agenda as it is presented.
Do you really think the discussion in the live chat is that long? That we, I mean, as chair and vice chair, hopefully you guys can put it together where we can come up with a plan to move that and move
No,
everything.
I think the point was for moving health is to make sure that we're providing adequate time to discuss issues surrounding health, not only public health, but mental health and physical health as well. So that I think, based on the conversation that we were having, is the rationale for taking health out and not necessarily like, infrastructure more broadly or gentrification or homelessness.
So you're taking health out and we're going to discuss it another time? Or is this added to the whole overall? This is where I'm confused. Is this another meeting we need to add? Because I see meetings in December, February, and March. So what is the issue that there's an urgency that we need to discuss it in December?
No, not necessarily. And maybe Member Holder or Member Grills or Member Tamaki can speak to it, but I think based on what I was hearing, there would potentially be an additional meeting, an additional hearing, whereby we discuss health on its own. And even what I'm hearing from Tamaki, issues around technology as well is something that I'm hearing too. But the main point is that, I'll let others speak.
Well, if I could just chime in, Chair Moore. So we're looking to carve out additional time. So in as much as the health discussion needs a full day, that's what people are saying, then yes, I think we're talking about adding a day. And I think Chair Grills was talking about after the holidays to insert a full day of testimony and discussion, just focus on health. So if we do that, that removes, one of the morning sessions on December 8th. So that frees up time to insert the discussion and approval of the outlines anyway. As to how long the chat discussion would take, maybe it might not take that long. But I think the outlines will probably take long or that long, significantly longer, and we've got 12 to get through. And the report, it depends on the outlines, and our input depends on the approval of the outlines for the report. So I think we need to carve out significant space for that anyway. And then the technology discussion it didn't sync well with gentrification and homelessness, which seems to be the focus of December 7th. There's highways and things like that, park construction that contributes to the homelessness. Gentrification is definitely part of that. So that seemed to be symmetrical and thematically makes sense to me. And if we remove the discrimination in technology and either take it up another day or dispense with it, then we free up additional time. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
So
Madam Chair, may I intercede for a moment? There is a motion on the floor with a second. I was trying to determine, is that part of discussion as to whether or not you're going to vote that motion up or down? Or are you wanting to vote it down and then go back to amending the proposed schedule? It sounds like the latter. Can you clarify that?
I can withdraw, but let me try this. What if I withdraw the motion? We did another motion, because it sounds like that infamous S word is important, having a Saturday meeting or having an additional meeting. Because we're adding to the schedule of 12 outlines, we're getting to 13 and 14 or whatever that number is, and we may need another hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, so if you withdraw your motion and the person who seconded withdraws their second, then you have nothing on the floor, and then you can proceed accordingly. So you wanted to, if you withdraw your second.
Before I did that, I want to make sure that we're not
what
going
they want. Okay.
Does that sound reasonable, especially in light that we really wanted to have a Saturday hearing, meeting, outreach anyway? Maybe this is where we could actually have one.
Yes, agreed.
Yes, same.
And any other, the other thing is the other beauty of it, if there's any other additional sections or things we want to discuss, we could agendize that in that also, so that we don't leave anything out that we felt was not adequately in the 12 outline sessions. And we'd also satisfy having a meeting hearing on Saturday so people can actually come, killing two birds with one stone. I see some heads going like that, so I'm gonna give this another shot. So I would like to adopt the outline and the draft schedule that on screen with an additional hearing, whether that's on Saturday or another day that's convenient with the members of this task force to hear any additional sections outside the 12 outline sections that could be incorporated into that, so we can completely exhaust this subject. How about that? Probably the longest motion in the history of motions, but yeah.
Can I make a friendly amendment to it?
Anything you want at this point.
Okay. Okay, so could the motion be something to the effect of moving to modify the December agenda, removing public health from the agenda, and adding in adequate time for the discussion of outline. And was it outlines? And there was
Subpoenas.
Subpoena and chat function.
Live chat, yes. And then we could do a different motion to then add another meeting for coverage of, perhaps we could do one additional day in mid-January. And that could be a different motion to address mental health, physical health, public health. And perhaps maybe we could add the technology and infrastructure on that day.
So
Is
do
there
you
a
want to
second?
What, can you please clarify? You have one motion. Okay, what the Assembly Member Jones Sawyer, he withdrew his motion. The seconder did not withdraw theirs.
Oh,
I'll withdraw my second. I will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, so now you have made a motion. Would you make your motion clean? It's not an amendment to anything. It's just a new motion. And deal with your 2-day hearing first, because that, if you're moving to amend or to adopt the proposed agenda. So identify what is on that proposed agenda, item by item, so that it is clear to whoever's writing this down what your agenda will look like on that 7th and on the 8th, and then move to adopt that proposed agenda. And your second motion is to add a third or another meeting date for Saturday, from what I'm hearing. Is that correct?
I was trying to do it all in one motion.
Okay, you can do that, but I just want to make sure it's all clear.
Well, Parliamentarian Johnson, I think, Member Reggie Jones Sawyer was moving us forward. So I want to thank Member Reggie Jones Sawyer for that. But I think Member Grills kind of encapsulated what the motion is. And so
No,
also
she encapsulated what she wanted. She wanted to discuss the outline, I believe, and some other things.
No, that wasn't me. That was something everybody has already said we need to do, is to discuss the outlines if we're going to make our June. That wasn't a personal preference.
Oh, okay.
I was just trying to streamline what you were saying to make it really crystal clear. That's all. So if it did not do that, I am sorry.
Yeah, I think mine wasn't that clear either. So I just wanted to adopt the outline and the draft schedule that's on the screen. That's all I wanted to do. If I'd have to do a separate motion, or if we have to do a separate motion to have a Saturday meeting to ensure that we take up all the other items that have been discussed for the last 45 minutes, if that's appropriate, and that gives everyone comfort level that we discussed everything, then let's do it.
Chair Moore and Assembly Member, I can try to take a stab at one motion.
Yes, thank you.
That's okay.
Before you do that, yes, but also I wanted to say, the consensus seems to be, before we put out a motion on the floor, the consensus seems to be we're going to take health out and focus on health at another hearing after the holidays. Focus on technology even after the holidays, whether that be on a weekday or Saturday. And for the December hearing, we're going to talk about infrastructure, gentrification, and homelessness, preferably on day one, and then have a full day two, where we talk about entertainment, digital media, the contributions of the African American community, not only looking at it in the perspective of exclusion. So I kind of wanted to just give a high level overview of the discussion so far. Also bringing in that in the December meeting, we need to have a conversation about the outline, subpoena power, and the live chat.
Yes.
You don't have consensus because I don't understand what you just said. So
Well, I
don't understand what a discussion about the outline. What is it? Another discussion about the outline?
Well, I think that's the missing piece here. I think there needs to be some clarity. Well, let me just clarify, Reggie Sawyer. So yesterday, we voted that the draft outlines that the DOJ staff has been sending us, we're going to use that as kind of a basis where we're going to individually provide feedback on those particular outlines. And then at a public hearing, we're going to discuss all of our comments related to those outlines and then approve the outlines based on our comments. So, it's not a conversation about, that's what the conversation is going to be about. We have these 12 outlines. The DOJ is sending us these 12 outlines. We're going to provide comments when we're at home or when we're at work through chat changes. And then when we meet again in December, the task force is going to consolidate all those comments from us. We're going to have a discussion about it, and then we're going to vote on approving the outlines as amended or revised.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
That is correct. And that's one agenda item with 12 components, possibly, however you end up doing it.
And that's why it may take 2 hours. It may take, like you said, it could take 30 minutes, it could take an hour, but realistically, given the breadth of the material, we're probably going to have to take at least an hour and a half for it.
Well, the thing is, Madam Chair, is if it takes less than that, that's good. So you're good. You can keep moving.
True. That's true too. So if there isn't any consensus, that's fine. If there's any other clarifying questions that the DOJ can clarify, that I can clarify, that Parliamentarian Johnson can clarify, or any other task force members can clarify for one another, let's do that before we entertain a motion.
Chair Moore?
Yes, Mr. Newman, you're recognized.
I think you're saying if I can clarify a question. I think there was a question raised in the discussion that I think that I can clarify maybe to help. This is with regard to it sounds like a proposal to pull public health from the December meeting and schedule a separate meeting on public health. Now, we talked yesterday in the DOJ updates about coming back in the next meeting with a, with a sort of a study and a response on the request for Saturday meetings, and then a vote in the next meeting about scheduling Saturday meetings. And one component of the scheduling of the Saturday meetings, of course, is all of your schedules. So what I would say is, one important factor in whether we can schedule in January, especially which has a couple of holiday days in January, we would need to make sure that we can get a quorum on a Saturday. So I don't know if the idea of breaking out public health and scheduling another meeting, and then we can sort of take in the information from the members of the task force as to availability, and then come back in the next meeting and have dates that we can report out to you. I think we have to report out some of the other scheduled dates as well. We could do that as well. We could make that part of our DOJ updates, and then the action item could be setting the meeting for a separate distinctive meeting on public health, whether it's 1 day, 2 day, Saturday, et cetera. That's something that could be scheduled at the next meeting, and we can report out on all of that information.
That's fine, but just to clarify, it'll be a meeting on health in general, not necessarily public health. Public health would be discussed.
Sorry, thank you very much. I was going off of the agenda here.
No problem. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we can entertain a motion at this time.
Honestly, I think the only thing that we have consensus on is that we adopt what's up on the screen. And in the December meeting, we also talk about the live chat subpoenas and unfinished business.
Yeah. If I could just go back, I'm going to take a stab at a motion. Just one thing before I do that is I do think that we should include in the motion a totally separate meeting for the discussion of health. And because we are running up against the clock, clearly, based on what is in front of us, and I prefer not to wait until the next meeting to just decide when we're going to meet again, because that may be too late. So I'm going to take a stab at this. So I move that we adopt the December 7 and 8 agenda with the following modifications: that we remove the public health section, that we add a discussion on the following things: all 12 outlined sections, subpoena, and the chat function, and that we have a standalone meeting to discuss health.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been properly moved and seconded to adopt the December 7th and 8th a tentative agenda with the following modifications: remove public health as a substantive topic, add discussion and items for all 12 outlines, subpoena powers, the chat function, and to also have a standalone meeting for the issue of health in general. Is there any discussion on this matter?
That include removal of the discrimination and technology section.
Happy to accept a friendly amendment to remove it.
Yeah, thank you. I think that would help with the time element.
Yes.
Thanks.
Any other discussion on the matter? Okay. Parliamentarian Johnson, does there need to be, I believe so, from my notes, there needs to be a formal process for amending the motion?
To amend the motion?
Mhm.
What are you I'm sorry, is there a formal process? Yes.
Right. And so does
The,
my my
yeah,
point? Mhm.
yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you, does someone want to amend the motion that's currently on the floor? And they would
Yes,
just move
that was
to, yeah, just move to amend it and then state what your amendment is.
Chair Moore, can I just jump in real quick and ask the parliamentarian a question for clarification?
sure. Yes.
With regard to a friendly amendment, does there need to be a vote on that, or can the maker of the motion accept that in the
Okay,
second?
so technically, there's no such thing as a friendly amendment.
Okay,
For
so we're
something,
not
yeah.
doing Robert.
Yeah, so
So,
the answer is no. You need to, because it's not just her or you accepting it. It's the whole committee. It's the whole.
no, it's the whole committee
task force.
voting on it, not.
Right. That's what we're talking about. You have to vote on the amendment. Because the entire task force
as
has
separate
to
from the original motion that was put on the floor.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
Can I suggest something that might be faster, that Chair Montgomery Steppe just withdraws her initial motion and then restates
I will withdraw
another motion, and then we vote on that.
And then Senator Bradford just withdrew a second. Okay. Thank you for that.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay. So now I'll entertain a new motion. Member Montgomery Steppe? I think you're on mute. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I was looking up Robert's rules, but I guess we don't go by that. Member Tamaki. All right. Okay. I'm going to try this again. I move that we accept the tentative scheduled meeting topics for December 7th and 8th with the following modifications: removal of the public health section, removal of the discrimination in technology section, and addition of all 12 outlined sections, the subpoena and chat function, and that we schedule a discussion on health in general at another standalone meeting.
Is there a second?
I will second again.
So it has been properly moved and seconded to adopt the December 7th and 8th agenda with the following modifications: remove the public health section, remove the discrimination in technology section, add a discussion on approving all 12 outlines, a discussion on our subpoena powers, and a discussion on restoring the live chat function, in addition to holding a standalone meeting on health in general. Is there any discussion on the matter? Further discussion, I'd like to cue Parliamentarian Johnson, who will then cue Ms. Belton for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Belton, would you please call the roll and call the vote?
Thank you. We will vote in Madam Chair and Parliamentarian Johnson. We will go in order. Chair Moore, your vote, please.
Aye.
Chair Moore votes aye. Vice Chair Dr. Brown. Senator Stephen Bradford.
Bradford, aye.
Bradford votes aye. Dr. Cheryl Grills.
Aye.
Dr. Grills votes aye. Lisa Holder.
Aye.
Lisa Holder votes aye. Assemblymember Reginald Jones Sawyer.
Jones Sawyer not voting.
Jones Sawyer abstains. Dr. Javon Scott Lewis.
Aye.
Dr. Javon Lewis votes aye. Don Tamaki.
Aye.
Don Tamaki votes aye. Councilmember Monica Montgomery Steppe.
Aye.
Councilmember Monica Montgomery Steppe votes aye. Madam Chair, on the motion, there are 8 members present. 7 members have voted aye, and 1 member abstains.
Thank you, Ms. Belton. The vote was 7 ayes, 0 nays, and 1 abstention. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Now, the next item of the agenda is our adjournment. So this is a reminder to the task force and members of the public that the next 2-day meeting will be on December 7th and 8th. I want to personally thank all the task force members, DOJ staff, and members of the public and members of the press for your engagement over these past 2 days. And we are looking forward to continuing the work in December. If there aren't any last comments or questions, only comments from task force members, then we can adjourn. Are there any last comments from task force members? Okay, thank you. With that said, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.